The hospital chaplain was the one who called to tell me my father was dead. Not my mother, not my brothers. A stranger, because I was still listed as his emergency contact, written on a piece of paper hidden in his wallet. When I got to the house, my brother stood in the doorway like he was guarding it. And when the lawyer's wife pulled me aside at the funeral and whispered, "Make sure you're at the reading. It's important," my family spent the next week trying to convince me it had been canceled. Before I continue with my story, it really helps to know that someone out there is listening. So if this is resonating with you in any way, or if it simply caught your attention, please let me know in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from, or just say hello. There's something incredibly comforting about knowing I'm not alone in this. Thanks a lot. Now, back to the story. The house looked smaller than I remembered. I sat in my car at the end of the driveway, engine still running, watching the October wind strip yellow leaves from the oak tree my father planted the year I was born. My mother had wanted to cut it down years ago, said it blocked the light in the kitchen, but Dad never let her. Now his truck wasn't in the driveway. Now there was nothing stopping her. I'd gotten the call 3 days ago, not from my mother, not from Derek or Tyler, from the hospital chaplain who'd found my number in Dad's wallet, written on a piece of paper he'd folded into the sleeve behind his insurance card. I was listed as his emergency contact. I didn't know that until the chaplain told me. My phone buzzed. Text from my friend Hannah, "You don't have to go in yet, take your time." I turned off the engine. The front door opened before I reached the porch. Tyler stood there in a button-down shirt I'd never seen him wear, his face arranged into something that was probably meant to look grieved. He was 32, 2 years younger than me, and he still had that college boy softness around his jaw that made him look perpetually unprepared for whatever was happening. "Lily," he didn't move from the doorway, "you actually came." He was my father. "Right," Tyler glanced behind him into the house. "Mom's not. She's having a hard time. Maybe give her some space." "I'm here for the arrangements." "Yeah, about that." He crossed his arms. "We've kind of got it handled. Derek's been dealing with the funeral home, and Mom's been going through Dad's things to figure out what to." "Going through his things?" "Someone has to." I stepped up onto the porch. Tyler didn't move. "I want to see his room," I said. "Lily," he exhaled through his nose, "this really isn't a good time. Maybe tomorrow after things settle down." "Move." Something in my voice made him step aside. Maybe it was the flatness of it, the way I'd stopped trying to make myself palatable. I walked past him into the house where I'd grown up, where I'd learned early that being the only daughter meant being the afterthought, where my mother had spent 30 years making sure I knew my place. The hallway smelled like pine cleaner and something floral, artificial. My mother's candles. She'd always hated how the house smelled, like old wood and my father's pipe tobacco and whatever he'd been cooking, and she'd spent years trying to scrub it into something more acceptable. "Lily." I turned. Derek stood at the end of the hall near the kitchen. He was 36, the older brother, the golden child, the one my mother talked about like he was going to be governor someday. In reality, he sold insurance in town and played golf with men who made him feel important. "We weren't expecting you until tomorrow," Derek said. He had a glass of something amber in his hand. Scotch, probably. Dad's scotch. I drove through the night. "That's a long drive from, where are you now?" "Portland." "Seattle." "Right," he sipped his drink. "You move around a lot." I didn't answer. There was no point explaining that I'd stayed in Seattle for 3 years now, that I had a job there I was good at, that the reason I moved around before that was because every time I put down roots somewhere, my mother would find a way to mention it to Dad like it was evidence of my instability. "Lily's always been flighty, Ray. You know how she is. Not like the boys." "Where's Mom?" I asked. "Resting. She hasn't slept since." Derek paused. "It's been hard on her." "I'm sure." "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing." I started toward the stairs. "I'm going to see his room." "Lily, wait." Derek set down his glass and followed me. "You can't just barge in here and start making demands. Mom's been the one taking care of him. For months. Where were you?" I stopped on the second step, turned around. Derek was close enough that I could smell the scotch on his breath. I called every week, I said. And every week, Mom told me he was sleeping, or he wasn't feeling up to talking, or the doctor said he needed rest. I drove up in June and she told me at the door that he didn't want to see me, that it would upset him. Maybe it would have. Did he say that? Did he actually say he didn't want to see me? Derek's jaw tightened. He looked away. That's what I thought. I turned back toward the stairs. I'm going to see his room. They'd moved him to the downstairs bedroom in the last few months, when the stairs became too much. But his things, his real things, the ones that mattered, were still upstairs in my parents' room. I didn't want to go in there. I wanted to see the room that had been his study, the small space at the end of the hall where he kept his books and his fishing gear and the box of photographs he'd saved for me. The door was closed. I pushed it open. The room was empty. Not empty like someone had just cleaned it. Empty like someone had erased it. The bookshelves were bare. The old leather chair was gone. The desk where he used to sit and read to me when I was small, where he'd helped me with homework and taught me how to tie fishing flies, the desk was just gone. I stood there for a long moment, not moving. Mom had the room cleared out last month. I turned. Tyler was behind me, looking uncomfortable. Last month, I repeated. Dad hadn't been up here in a while. She wanted to turn it into a guest room. He wasn't even dead yet. He was, Tyler rubbed the back of his neck. He wasn't going to get better, Lily. Everyone knew that. Where are his things? I don't know, storage maybe. You'd have to ask Mom. I walked past him without another word. Down the stairs, through the living room, to the back of the house where the downstairs bedroom was. The door was open. My mother was sitting on the edge of the bed. She looked up when I appeared in the doorway. Linda Hartwell was 63, 3 years older than my father had been. She'd aged in the way women age when they're constantly performing something. Her hair was still dyed the same auburn it had been for 20 years. Her nails were done, her face carefully made up even now. But her hands were shaking slightly, and when she saw me, something flickered across her face that wasn't quite surprise. Lily, she said my name the way she always had, like I was an inconvenience she'd never quite figured out how to manage. Mom. She stood up. I didn't realize you were coming today. The chaplain called me 3 days ago. The chaplain. My mother's lips pressed together. I told them Derek was handling notifications. Derek didn't call me. I'm sure he meant to. Did he? My mother smoothed her hands down her black cardigan. This isn't the time for this, Lily. I've just lost my husband. I've just lost my father. Something shifted in her face, just for a moment. That old flicker of irritation she'd never quite learned to hide. The look she got whenever I reminded her that I existed, that I had a claim to this family too. Yes, she said, I suppose you have. I looked past her to the bed. The sheets had been stripped. The nightstand was bare except for a lamp. On the dresser, there was a single photograph in a frame, my parents on their wedding anniversary 10 years ago. Derek and Tyler stood on either side of them. I wasn't in the picture. I'd been living in Denver then, and no one had told me about the party. I want to help with the arrangements, I said. That's kind of you, but we have it handled. He was my father. And he was my husband. My mother's voice was patient, gentle, the voice she used when she wanted people to think I was being unreasonable. For 37 years, Lily, I knew what he wanted. We discussed it. What about the service? Thursday, St. Andrews. Thursday, that was in 2 days. Don't most families wait longer? Ray wouldn't have wanted a fuss. He was very clear about that. Was he? Lily, she sighed. I know this is hard for you. Grief makes people react in all kinds of ways. But I need you to trust that, Derek, and I have this under control. You're welcome to attend the service, of course. Your family. She said it like she was granting me permission. Like showing up at my own father's funeral was a privilege she was being generous enough to allow. I'll be there, I said. Good, my mother smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Now I really do need to rest. It's been an exhausting few days. She moved toward the door, waiting for me to step aside so she could pass. I didn't move. "Where are his things?" I asked. "From the study." "I'm not sure what you mean." "His books, his chair, the desk." "Oh," she waved a hand. "We had to make some space. The hospice equipment needed. It doesn't matter now. I'm sure everything is somewhere." "I want the photograph box." My mother's hand paused on the door frame. "What photograph box?" "The one he kept in the study. Pictures of us when I was small. The ones Grandma Ruth gave him before she died. He showed it to me once when I was 12. He said he was keeping it safe for me." My mother's expression didn't change, but something hardened behind her eyes. Grandma Ruth, my father's mother, had died when I was 14. She'd been the one person in the family who made me feel like I belonged, who'd told me I was just like my father, who'd slipped me $20 bills and said, "Don't tell your mother." My mother had hated her. "I don't know anything about a photograph box," she said. I looked at her. She looked back at me. "Mom," I said quietly, "where is the box?" "I'm telling you, I don't." She stopped, composed herself. "Lily, there were a lot of things in that room. Old things. Things that had been collecting dust for years. I'm not going to apologize for wanting to update the house. Your father understood. He agreed with me." "Did he?" "Yes." Her voice hardened just slightly. "He did. Now if you'll excuse me." She brushed past me into the hallway. I heard her footsteps moving toward the stairs, then the creak of the second floor as she retreated to the master bedroom. The door closed with a soft click. I stood in the empty room where my father had died and looked at the anniversary photograph on the dresser. Derek and Tyler flanking my parents, everyone smiling, the perfect family portrait. No space for me. There had never been space for me. I remembered being 12, coming home from school with a report card, straight A's, a note from my teacher saying I was gifted, that they wanted to move me up a grade. I'd been so proud. I'd run into the kitchen to show my mother. She'd barely looked at it. "That's nice, Lily. Can you go set the table? Your brothers will be home soon." Later that night, I'd found my father alone in his study. He'd read every word of the report card twice. Then he'd pulled me into his lap and said, "You're going to do great things, Lily. Don't let anyone tell you different." That was the night he'd shown me the photograph box. Pictures of me as a baby. Pictures of Grandma Ruth holding me, the two of us laughing at something off camera. Pictures my mother had never wanted on display. "Your grandmother wanted you to have these," he'd said. "She said you were special. She made me promise to keep them safe for you." He'd kept his promise, until my mother decided to erase that too. The funeral was small. St. Andrew's was a white clapboard church at the edge of town, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and funerals were as much about gossip as grief. My mother sat in the front pew with Derek and Tyler on either side of her, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. I sat 3 rows back, alone. The minister talked about Raymond Hartwell as a devoted husband, a pillar of the community, a man who loved his family. He didn't mention me by name. He mentioned my mother, Derek, and Tyler several times. Afterward, there was a reception at the house. My mother had hired a catering company, small sandwiches, pastries, coffee in silver urns. People milled around the living room, speaking in low voices. Several of them looked at me with curiosity, like they were trying to place me. "You're Lily Wright, Ray's daughter." I turned. The woman speaking to me was in her 60s, gray-haired, wearing a cardigan with small embroidered flowers. "Yes." "I'm Margaret Brennan. My husband is Ray's lawyer." "Oh," I shook her hand. "I didn't know he had a lawyer." "For years," Margaret smiled sadly. "They went fishing together sometimes. Howard was very fond of him." She glanced across the room to where my mother was holding court near the fireplace. "I'm sorry for your loss. It's a loss." There was something in her voice, something careful. "Thank you," I said. Margaret leaned in slightly. "Howard wants to talk to you about the will. There's going to be a formal reading next week, but—" she glanced around. "He says it's important that you're there." I wasn't sure I'd be invited. "You're invited." Margaret's eyes met mine. Make sure you're there, dear, that's all I'm saying. She moved away before I could ask anything else. I watched her cross the room to where a gray-haired man in a dark suit was standing near the window. Her husband, presumably. He caught my eye and gave me a small nod. Making friends. I turned. Derek was beside me, holding a plate of untouched finger sandwiches. Just talking. Margaret Brennan. Derek's voice was light, casual, but there was something underneath it. Her husband's the one handling Dad's estate. I know. Do you? He picked up one of the sandwiches, examined it, set it back down. You know, Mom was surprised you came. We all were. You've been pretty scarce the last few years. Mom made it clear I wasn't welcome. That's not true. You're always welcome here. We're family. Derek, I turned to face him fully. You didn't call me when Dad was dying. No one told me he was in the hospital until the chaplain reached out. Mom wouldn't let me see him for months before that. Don't stand there and tell me I'm family. Derek's jaw tightened. He glanced around, checking if anyone was listening. You always do this, he said quietly. Make everything about you. Dad's dead, Lily. Mom's a widow. And you're here starting drama at his funeral. I'm not starting anything. I'm standing here talking to people. You're talking to Howard Brennan's wife about the will. She came to me. Sure she did. Derek's smile was thin. Look, I know you probably have some fantasy about Dad leaving you something significant, some, I don't know, secret fortune or whatever, but you need to prepare yourself for reality. You've been gone for years. You barely visited. You didn't take care of him when he was sick. Mom did. We did. If Dad left everything to us, that's because we earned it. I didn't say anything. I'm not trying to be cruel, Derek continued. I'm trying to help you manage your expectations, so you don't embarrass yourself next week. Thanks for the warning. Lily. I need some air. I set down my coffee cup and walked toward the back door, leaving Derek standing there with his plate of tiny sandwiches and his practiced concern. The backyard was where my father and I had spent most of our time together. There was a vegetable garden along the fence that he'd let me help plant when I was 6. Tomatoes, peppers, squash. Every summer, we'd harvest them together, and he'd make this tomato sauce that took all day, and the whole house would smell like basil and garlic. It was our thing, the one thing my mother couldn't take from us because she didn't want to be part of it anyway. The garden was gone now, paved over. My mother had put in a patio with outdoor furniture, the kind of stuff you see in magazines. She'd done it 3 years ago, while my father was too weak to stop her. I sat down on one of the cushioned chairs and looked at the oak tree. My father had planted it the day I was born. My mother had told him it was too close to the house, that it would cause problems with the foundation. He'd planted it anyway. Some things are worth the trouble, he'd told me once, when I asked about it. Some things you plant because they matter, not because they're practical. The back door opened. I didn't turn around. Lily. It was Tyler. I heard his footsteps on the patio stones, then felt the weight shift as he sat in the chair across from me. I wasn't, he paused. Look, Derek can be a jerk sometimes. He doesn't mean half of what he says. Yes, he does. Tyler was quiet for a moment. Then, yeah, okay, maybe he does. I finally looked at him. He was holding a glass of water, turning it in his hands. He looked younger than 32, sitting there. He'd always been the softer one, the one who sometimes looked uncomfortable when my mother or Derek said something cutting. It didn't make him good. It just made him weak. Can I ask you something? I said. Sure. The photograph box, the one Dad kept in his study, do you know what happened to it? Tyler's hands stopped moving. He looked down at his water. Tyler. I don't, he swallowed. Mom had Derek take a bunch of stuff to the dump a few weeks ago, when we were clearing out the study. Something went cold in my chest. The dump. I don't know if the box was in there. I wasn't paying attention to what was in the bags. Did you tell her what was in that box? Did you tell her it had Grandma Ruth's pictures? I didn't know. She knew. My voice was very flat. She knew exactly what was in that box, and she threw it away. Tyler wouldn't meet my eyes. He took a drink of his water like it was something stronger. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I know that doesn't, I'm just sorry." I stood up. "I'm going back to my hotel." "Lily, tell Mom I'll see her at the reading." I walked around the side of the house to my car, not going back through the reception, not saying goodbye to anyone. When I pulled out of the driveway, I didn't look back at the house. I didn't look at the oak tree. I just drove. The week before the will reading was the longest week of my life. I stayed at a motel off the highway, one of those places that smelled like industrial cleaner and had scratchy sheets. I couldn't bring myself to leave town, even though there was nothing for me to do there. Every morning, I'd drive past the house without stopping, just to see it, just to remember. On Tuesday, I called Hannah. "You should come home," she said. "Whatever they're leaving you, it's not worth this." "I know. So why are you staying?" I watched the sun set over the parking lot of the motel. An 18-wheeler pulled in, its brakes hissing. "Because something doesn't feel right," I said. "What do you mean?" "The lawyer's wife, at the funeral. She told me to make sure I was at the reading. She said it was important." "Okay, but Lily, don't get your hopes up. You know what your mom's like. She's probably had years to work on your dad. If there was anything for you in that will, she would have found a way to cut you out." "Maybe." "Probably, definitely," Hannah sighed. "I just don't want to see you get hurt again." I thought about the study, the empty shelves, the photograph box in a landfill somewhere, Grandma Ruth's face rotting under garbage. "I think I'm past getting hurt," I said. On Wednesday, I drove to the cemetery. My father's grave was still fresh, the dirt dark and soft. No headstone yet, just a temporary marker with his name on it. Raymond Allen Hartwell, beloved husband and father. I crouched down and looked at the marker for a long time. "I tried," I said quietly. "I tried to see you. I called every week. I drove up 3 times and she turned me away at the door." My voice caught. I should have pushed harder. I should have made a scene. I should have. A car pulled into the cemetery lot. I stood up quickly, wiping my eyes. It was Howard Brennan, the lawyer. He got out of his car and walked toward me slowly. He was wearing a gray coat and carrying a leather briefcase that looked older than I was. "Miss Hartwell." "Mr. Brennan." He stopped a few feet away, looking down at the grave. "I was sorry to hear about your father. He was a good man." "Thank you." "I meant what Margaret said, at the reception." He glanced at me. "It's important that you're at the reading, Monday, 10 a.m. at my office." "I'll be there." "Good." He hesitated, then reached into his briefcase and pulled out a business card. "If anything, if anyone tries to prevent you from attending, call me directly." I took the card. Why would someone try to prevent me? Howard Brennan looked at me for a long moment. His eyes were tired, but kind. "Your father was worried about you," he said finally. "In the last few years, he called me several times asking about options, things he could do to make sure you were taken care of. My mother told me he didn't want to see me." "I know what your mother told you." His voice was carefully neutral. "I also know what your father told me, and those two things don't match." He turned and walked back to his car. I stood there holding his business card, watching until he drove away. On Thursday, I got a phone call from Derek. "The reading's been postponed," he said. "Mom's not feeling well. We're pushing it to next month." Mr. Brennan didn't mention that. "I'm telling you now. I'll call his office to confirm." "Don't bother him. I already talked to him. It's postponed." I hung up and called Howard Brennan's office. His secretary put me through immediately. "The reading hasn't been postponed," Brennan said. "Monday, 10 a.m., I'll see you there." Derek just called me and said. I'm aware of what Derek said. He called me too. There was a note of something in Brennan's voice, not quite anger, but close. "Miss Hartwell, I've been practicing law for 40 years. I've seen families behave in all sorts of ways when there's an estate involved. I want you to know that your father's wishes are documented and legally binding. No one can change them now." "What are his wishes?" "Monday, 10 a.m. He hung up. I sat on the edge of my motel bed and looked at the wall. There was a water stain near the ceiling that looked vaguely like a bird in flight. Derek had lied to me. He'd tried to keep me from the reading. Why? Unless there was something in the will he didn't want me to know about. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I didn't leave the motel much. I ordered pizza and ate it cold. I watched bad TV. I tried not to think about what Monday might bring. On Sunday night, my phone rang again. This time it was my mother. Lily. Her voice was honey-sweet, the voice she used when she wanted something. I feel like we got off on the wrong foot last week. I was grieving. I wasn't myself. Okay. I wanted to apologize for how things went and for any confusion about the reading. Derek shouldn't have called you about that. He was trying to be helpful, but he overstepped. I'll be there tomorrow. Of course you will. That's your right. A pause. I just wanted to prepare you, that's all. Your father, he had a very specific vision for how he wanted his estate handled. He wanted to make sure I was taken care of. I'm sure you understand. I'm sure I will. And I hope you won't be disappointed. These things are never easy, but family is family. We'll get through this together. I almost laughed. Good night, Mom. Good night, dear. See you tomorrow. She hung up. I set my phone on the nightstand and stared at the ceiling. My mother was nervous about something. She wouldn't have called otherwise. She'd never called me in her life unless she wanted something or wanted to prevent something. I thought about my father in his study, showing me the photograph box. I thought about him planting the oak tree the day I was born. I thought about Howard Brennan saying, "Your father was worried about you." I didn't sleep. Monday morning, 10 a.m. Howard Brennan's office was on the second floor of a brick building downtown, the kind of building that had been there for 100 years and would be there for 100 more. The stairs creaked as I climbed them. The hallway smelled like old paper and lemon wood polish. The door to his office was open. Inside, my mother sat in one of the leather chairs facing the desk. Derek was beside her. Tyler stood by the window, looking uncomfortable. They all turned when I walked in. Lily, my mother smiled. It was the same smile from the funeral. You found the place. I did. I took the remaining chair, the one on the other side of the room from my mother. Howard Brennan was behind his desk, papers arranged neatly in front of him. He looked up when I sat down, gave me a small nod, and waited until everyone was settled. Thank you all for coming, he said. I know this is a difficult time. I'll try to make this as straightforward as possible. My mother folded her hands in her lap. Derek crossed his arms. Tyler kept looking at the window like he wanted to jump through it. Mr. Hartwell's will is fairly simple, Brennan continued. The bulk of the estate, liquid assets, investment accounts, and the contents of the house are to be divided equally between Linda Hartwell, Derek Hartwell, and Tyler Hartwell. My mother's shoulders relaxed slightly. Derek uncrossed his arms. As for Lily Hartwell, Brennan picked up a piece of paper. Mr. Hartwell has left to you, he paused, his father's pocket watch, currently non-functional. There was a moment of silence. Then my mother laughed, a small, soft sound quickly covered with her hand. Derek's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. Tyler looked at the floor. I'm sorry, my mother said, composing herself. I don't mean to, it's just, Ray did always have a sense of humor. His father's watch, Derek repeated. He glanced at me. That old broken thing. It hasn't worked in years, my mother added. We offered to throw it out, but Ray wouldn't let us. Sentimental reasons, he said. She was smiling now, not even trying to hide it. Derek was shaking his head slowly, like he was in on a joke everyone understood. Even Tyler had a weird half-grin, though he still wouldn't look at me. Even dead, he knew you were worthless, Derek said. He said it low, almost a whisper, but in the quiet room, everyone heard it. I didn't move. I didn't react. I sat there and looked at my hands folded in my lap. Howard Brennan waited. The room settled into a satisfied silence. My mother reached for her purse, as if the meeting was over. There's one more matter, Brennan said. My mother paused. I'm sorry. Mr. Hartwell filed a second document separately. It's not part of the main will. He reached into a drawer and pulled out an envelope, plain white, sealed. My name written on the front in my father's handwriting. This is for Lily Hartwell only. My mother's smile flickered. What second document? I'm not at liberty to discuss the contents with anyone except Miss Hartwell. Brennan held out the envelope toward me. Your father was very specific about that. I took the envelope. It was heavier than I expected. This is ridiculous, Derek said. You can't just, we're family. If there's something else in the estate, we have a right to know. The main will has been read. The division I described stands. Brennan's voice was calm, measured. This document is separate, addressed to Miss Hartwell alone. I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, and beneath it, a piece of paper with an official seal. I read the letter first. My father's handwriting, a little shaky toward the end, but still his. Lily, I'm sorry, I tried to see you. I wrote letters, but I don't think they got to you. I asked for the phone, but they said you were busy, you didn't want to talk. I knew that wasn't true. You were always stubborn, but never cruel. The watch was your grandfather's. It doesn't work, but inside the back casing, there's a note I wrote you when you were 12. I never found the right time to give it to you. Maybe now is the time. The house was never marital property. My parents left it to me before I got married. It was always separate, always in my name alone. Your mother never paid much attention to paperwork. She let me handle all of that. She never asked to see the deed, and I never showed her. I transferred it to your name years ago, quietly. Brennan handled everything through his office. Taxes, notices, all of it. Your mother doesn't know, your brothers don't know, but now you do. I love you. I always loved you. Don't let anyone tell you different. Dad. I looked at the second piece of paper. It was a deed. To the house I grew up in. The house my mother had redecorated and redesigned and filled with her furniture and her photographs that didn't include me. The house where my grandmother had visited me when I was small. The house where my father had planted an oak tree the day I was born. It was in my name. It had been in my name for years. I looked up. My mother was watching me. Her smile was gone. Derek had gone very still. Tyler was staring at me with something that might have been fear. What is it? My mother's voice was sharp. What does it say? I handed the deed to Howard Brennan. He looked at it, nodded, and set it on the desk. The house at 147 Oak Street, he said, was never community property. Mr. Hartwell inherited it from his parents free and clear before his marriage. No mortgage, no liens. He maintained it as separate property throughout. The deed remained in his name alone until 7 years ago, when it was transferred to Lily Hartwell. All property tax correspondence and legal notices have been routed through this office at Mr. Hartwell's explicit request since that time. He looked at my mother. The property belongs to her. My mother's face went white. That's not, I never saw any. That was the point, Mrs. Hartwell. It's our home. She stood up. I've lived there for over 30 years. I decorated it, I maintained it, I took care of Ray in that house. The ownership is not in dispute. This is fraud. Derek was on his feet now, too. She manipulated him. She got to him somehow, The transfer was completed 7 years ago. Your father was in full possession of his faculties at the time. I witnessed the signing myself. He also had an independent medical evaluation conducted that day, specifically to document his competency. Your father was a careful man, Mr. Hartwell. He anticipated exactly this kind of challenge. I'll contest this. My mother's hands were shaking. I'll take this to court. You can't just throw me out of my own home. It's not your home, I said. Everyone looked at me. I was still sitting. My voice was calm. The letter from my father was in my lap. It was never your home, I said. It was his parents before that. He was letting you live there, and now he's gone and it's mine. My mother stared at me. For the first time since I could remember, she had nothing to say. Howard Brennan cleared his throat. According to the terms of the deed transfer and the separate documentation Mr. Hartwell filed with this office, The current occupants of the property have 30 days to vacate. Derek made a sound like he'd been punched. Tyler's face had gone gray. 30 days, my mother repeated. From today. My mother looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but not with grief, with rage. You, she said, you did this. I didn't do anything. I stood up and folded my father's letter carefully, putting it back in the envelope. You did this. For 34 years, you did this. I picked up the pocket watch from Brennan's desk, my grandfather's watch, the one they'd laughed about. It was heavy in my hand. Cold metal, history. Thank you, Mr. Brennan, I said. He nodded. I'll have the final paperwork sent to you. I walked out of the office. Behind me, I could hear my mother's voice rising, Derek's voice joining in, Tyler saying something too quiet to make out. The sound of people realizing that the ground had shifted beneath them, that the game they thought they were winning had different rules than they'd known. I took the stairs slowly. The watch was in my pocket, pressing against my hip with every step. Outside, the air was cold and clean. October, my father's favorite month. I sat in my car for a long time, not driving anywhere, just sitting, holding the watch. When I finally opened the back casing, there was a small piece of paper folded inside. My father's handwriting, older this time, steadier. For Lily on her 12th birthday. Time is the one thing you can't get back. Spend it on people who deserve you. Love, Dad. The next 3 weeks were chaos. My mother started calling the next morning. The first few voicemails were pleading. Lily, we need to talk about this. There's been some kind of mistake. Your father wouldn't have wanted this. By the third day, they'd turned threatening. She was going to sue. She had lawyers. I would regret this. I was destroying the family. I saved every voicemail, not because I planned to use them, but because I wanted to remember. I wanted proof, for myself, that I hadn't imagined the last 30 years. Derek showed up at my motel about a week later, wearing his concerned older brother face. Can we talk? He said when I opened the door. About what? About this situation, he gestured vaguely. With the house, I think there's been a misunderstanding. There's been no misunderstanding. Lily, come on. He stepped closer, dropping his voice like we were conspiring together. Mom's falling apart. She doesn't have anywhere else to go. All her friends are here. Her whole life is in that house. Then she should have thought about that before she spent 30 years pretending I didn't exist. That's not... Derek ran a hand through his hair. Look, I know things weren't perfect between you two, but you're blowing it out of proportion. That's what you always do. Make everything into a bigger deal than it needs to be. She threw away Grandma Ruth's photographs. Did you know that? Derek's face went very still. She had you take them to the dump. Grandma's pictures, the only pictures I had of me and Dad together. I didn't know what was in those bags. Yes, you did. Tyler told me, and you took them anyway. Lily, get out. I'm trying to help you here. If you push this, you're going to end up alone. Everyone in town knows Mom. Everyone loves her. You're going to be the villain in this story, not her. Then I'll be the villain. I started to close the door. Get out of my motel room, Derek. He caught the door with his hand. You can't just throw us out. 30 days. That's what the lawyer said. If you're not out by then, I'll have you removed. I pushed the door closed. He didn't try to stop me again. Tyler called a few days before the deadline. I almost didn't answer. I know you don't want to talk to me, he said. His voice was quiet. What do you want, Tyler? Mom's having a breakdown. She's not eating. She keeps saying the house is all she has left of Dad. It's not hers. I know. He was quiet for a moment. Derek wanted to fight it, but none of us have the money. Mom's going to stay with her sister in Florida. Okay. We'll be out before the deadline. I didn't say anything. Lily, his voice cracked slightly. That box, the photographs, I should have stopped him. I should have asked what was in there. But you didn't. No, I didn't. I hung up. I drove past the house on the morning of the move. There was a truck in the driveway, men carrying furniture out. The sleek modern pieces my mother had bought, the outdoor patio set, the bed from the master bedroom. I parked at the end of the street and watched. My mother came out carrying a small box. She looked older than she had at the funeral, smaller. She set the box in the back of her car and stood there for a moment, looking at the house. Then she turned her head and saw my car. We looked at each other across the distance. Her face twisted into something ugly, not grief, not even anger, hatred, pure and simple. She got in her car without looking back. By afternoon, everything was gone. The house stood empty, windows dark. Howard Brennan called me the next morning to confirm they'd officially vacated. He had the keys waiting at his office. I picked them up at noon. I drove to the house slowly, taking the long way through town, past the cemetery where my father was buried, past St. Andrews where his funeral had been, past the high school where I'd spent 4 years trying to be invisible. I parked in the driveway, got out, stood looking at the front door. The key fit perfectly. Inside, the house was empty. My mother had taken everything, every piece of furniture, every photograph, every trace that she had ever lived there. The walls were bare. The floors were dusty. The rooms echoed when I walked through them. But there were things she couldn't take. The built-in bookshelves in what used to be my father's study. The window seat in my old bedroom, where I used to sit and read for hours. The oak tree outside, its branches scraping gently against the side of the house. The bones of the place, the things that made it home. I walked upstairs to the attic. My mother had never liked the attic, too dusty, too old, too much effort to clean. She'd told my father years ago they should just seal it off. He hadn't. The hatch was in the ceiling of the hallway. I pulled it down and climbed the ladder. The attic was dim and musty, old furniture covered in sheets, boxes stacked against the walls, things my mother had never bothered with because they predated her. In the far corner, behind a broken rocking chair and a stack of water-damaged books, I found a wooden crate with my father's handwriting on the side. For Lily. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, me and my father in the garden. Grandma Ruth holding me as a baby, both of us laughing. My father and his mother standing in front of this house decades ago. Pictures of me at every age, first day of school, birthday parties my mother hadn't wanted to throw, fishing trips just the two of us. My father had hidden them up here, away from my mother, away from the clearing out she'd done. He'd kept them safe, just like he'd promised Grandma Ruth. I sat on the attic floor with the crate in my lap, holding photographs I thought I'd lost forever. Hannah flew out from Seattle the next week to help me move in. We painted the walls together, warm colors, earth tones, nothing like the sterile whites and grays my mother had favored. We found furniture at estate sales and thrift shops. We pulled up the patio stones and started turning the soil underneath. The watch sat on my nightstand, still broken. I didn't fix it. I didn't need it to work. One evening, while we were eating takeout on the floor of the empty living room, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This isn't over. You'll regret what you did to this family." Derek. I blocked the number and went back to my low main. "Who was that?" Hannah asked. "Nobody important." A month later, I got a letter forwarded from Howard Brennan's office. My mother had filed a civil suit contesting the deed transfer, claiming undue influence, claiming my father wasn't competent when he signed, claiming whatever her lawyer thought might stick. I called Brennan. "It won't go anywhere," he said. "Your father anticipated this. He had medical evaluations done at the time of the transfer, documented everything. She can file whatever she wants. She won't win." "How long will it take?" "These things drag on. Months, maybe. But she doesn't have the money to fight this properly, and her lawyer knows it. My guess is she'll drop it before it gets to court." He was right. 6 weeks later, the suit was withdrawn. Her lawyer had taken a look at the documentation, the medical evaluations, the witnessed signing, the paper trail my father had built, and told her she had no case. She'd spent $8,000 in legal fees to learn what Brennan had told her for free. I heard from Margaret Brennan, at the grocery store of all places, that my mother had moved to Florida, living with her sister in a 2-bedroom condo, fighting constantly. Her sister's husband had given them 6 months to figure out another arrangement. Derek's insurance company had let him go, something about a complaint from a client, a policy he'd mishandled while distracted by family matters. He was working at a car dealership now, selling used Toyotas on commission. I saw him once across the parking lot at the hardware store. He saw me too. Neither of us waved. Tyler had gone west. Montana, someone said, or maybe Wyoming, somewhere with a lot of empty space between people. Spring came early that year. The garden was starting to take shape. Tomato seedlings in the greenhouse I'd built from old windows, pepper plants hardening off on the back porch. I'd found my father's old sauce recipe in a cookbook stuffed in the attic, the pages stained and dog-eared. I was outside one morning, turning compost into the soil, when a car pulled into the driveway. I stood up, wiping dirt on my jeans. It was Tyler. He got out slowly, hands in his pockets. He looked different, thinner, more weathered, like he'd spent a lot of time outdoors or not sleeping. "I know you probably don't want to see me," he said. I didn't answer. I was driving through, on my way to somewhere else, and I saw the garden from the road. He looked past me at the turned soil, the seedlings. Dad would have liked that. I waited. "Mom keeps saying you stole everything from her, that you manipulated Dad, that you're the reason our family fell apart." He kicked at a pebble on the driveway. "I guess I just wanted to say, I mean. What do you want, Tyler?" He looked at me then. "I don't know," he said. "I thought maybe if I came here I'd figure it out, but I don't think there's anything to figure out, is there?" "No," I said, "there isn't." He nodded slowly, looked at the house, at the oak tree, at the garden I was building. "Okay," he said, "okay." He got back in his car. I was turning back to the soil, the trowel warm in my hand, the morning sun on my shoulders. I had tomatoes to plant.